ready? You already know what's coming.
Let's
You wanna
go,
say
granddad.
you wanna say it with me?
At the same time, a one, a two.
Um, welcome, welcome back to another episode of the Lightdrop podcast, where it's just two friends talking creativity and beyond. My name's Jamil.
And my name is Jeff.
And we've been alluding at this for the past few weeks, this topic that we want to talk about today, perfectionism.
Yeah.
Perfectionism.
It's the best answer you can give when you're trying to get a job. You know, you're like,
exactly.
I just work too hard. I'm perfect.
And this perfectionism concept is something that I think we're all familiar with to some extent. There's levels to it, but when you really think about it, it's kind of deep. You know, it really turns into a psychology thing that I don't think many of us are really conscious of where it starts, where it comes from, or even how it affects other people. And we got turned on to this book called The Perfection Trap, where they kind of dive into this topic, the psychology behind perfectionism, some of the different sides of it, the positive aspects, if any, right, but mostly the negative, and it really just breaks down perfectionism. And of course, Jeff and I, we think about this from the standpoint of creatives as artists, and if anybody's perfectionists, it's us artists. So we just wanted to really dive into that today. Jeff and I, we both started reading this book, and really kind of dissecting it and putting some thought into it. And it's a really, really interesting topic, in my opinion. So Jeff, tell
Yeah.
me what your like kind of takeaways are so far from this book, The Perfection Trap.
Yeah. So, and also shout out Lizzie for recommending the book.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my I haven't finished the book either. So like Jamil said, but I got to a certain chapter about the harmful ways that perfectionism uh, like affects our bodies. So the author was saying that there's this term, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's kind of this thing that people push that, like, even though you're experiencing pain, just go through it because you're going to be better on the other side. But perfectionism in that way can be very dangerous because it's like, what is the other side? It's like, why are you trying to get stronger? Like, what are you battling? And it's because a lot of times those those battles are, you're just battling yourself. It's not like somebody's tracking you,
A
for the most
misconception,
part.
right?
Yeah, it's like, who put this mark on you? Like, who told you that you had to do this to put yourself in this small box, right?
Why do we do that to ourselves? And and again, like I was saying, this topic is something that we kind of alluded to, maybe even touched on without even realizing it. But like when you really kind of break down this perfectionism, it really touches like so many of us to a certain degree. Like before I read this book, I wouldn't have considered myself a perfectionist. But
Me either.
when you
Yeah.
really kind of see what that means and kind of like the mentality that you have, um, it was kind of like a oh damn moment that I had where it kind of became clear to me how some of my I'll call them I'll call them misconceptions now about the way I need to work, the extent to
Mhm.
which I need to work, kind of like what it means to do something the right way, right? These are all these perceptions, these like perspectives that you have on whatever it is that you're working on. And so I'm starting to realize that like dang, this this is kind of a unhealthy way of viewing things, but it comes from essentially a misunderstanding about it and what really
Mhm.
matters.
Yeah, what you have to do, like you said, like what do you have to do to get a goal accomplished? And just thinking about, I've thought about that myself too. I'm like, am I also, while reading this book, I was like, am I also a perfectionist? I'm like, I don't feel like I am. I don't feel like I think about my ideas the way most people would think about perfectionism. It's like, oh, you're looking at every single detail. But I'll find myself kind of in those modes where I'm obsessing over something that I can't change or take any further. Um, so I think it's this perfectionism thing isn't just like the extreme level. It's also just those minute moments where you kind of rob yourself of living a full experience because you're obsessed with getting something to be as perfect as possible, right?
Yeah, there's levels to it. The author explains. I believe his name is um jeez, I don't even know his name. His last name
Yeah,
is Curran. We'll put that in the show notes. Look at us. Don't even know the author's name. But that's how good the book was, right?
yeah.
No, but there's
We're still reading it, so that's why we don't know his name yet.
yeah. He says it's 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 interesting how he breaks down these three like different types of perfectionism. There's like that perfectionism that we put on ourselves to where we are like telling ourselves, right? Like this pressure that we put on ourselves to be perfect, to be a perfect version of things, to obsess over things. There's perfectionism that's like placed onto us by like society, I guess you would say, where you would think, that you where you operate in a way because you think that that's the correct way to do it. And then
Mhm.
there's this perfectionism that like people kind of place on others, like you know, if you ever seen that movie Whiplash, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about with the
I watched it recently.
yeah, it's like the that coach or that director was like he demanded perfection from his students, that that perfectionism where it's like placed onto you by others and you expect it through others. And then between those three different kinds there's levels, right? There's like I'm absolutely like this obsessive kind of perfectionist over things, and then you know there's also a type where it's like sort of kind of maybe I really just maybe I really just strive for excellence, but I at the same time I also know when to stop, right? And it's just interesting because like I said, it turns into this psychology like exercise that you can start to ask yourself like where do I kind of sit on this scale of perfectionism.
Yeah, and that makes me think. Whenever I think about like the psychology of it, I kind of imagine looking down on myself when I'm worried about something. You know, when I'm like almost like I'm on the hamster wheel and I'm like either glued to the screen or I'm working or I'm doing something, and I feel bad for myself. I feel bad. I feel like like I'm missing out on other things because I'm in this. It's almost like a psychological trance to get a goal completed.
That's a good.
You're like, why is this thing so important right now? It feels
Yeah,
like this is do or die when it's like because it's especially as creatives, it's like sometimes you will change something so many times just because you can, so you can get in this cycle of like, what if I moved it this way, I moved it this way, and it's like
yeah,
incremental differences, and um yeah, it's just easy to get lost in that
yeah.
mode.
I've had experiences that I've like thought of before, but when I think about them from the context of this book, like those experiences where I've just been genuinely genuinely have believed that I need to do something a certain way for it to be correct, or for it to be right. When in reality, it's like, no, like these expectations or these ideas are things that I made the assumption of, right? It's like you said, you put yourself in this trance almost. It's kind of like
Yeah.
I was thinking about an analogy because I love analogies.
Let's go.
I love a good analogy. Was like Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah.
Like especially when you're in like a new couple, right? You and your
Mhm.
significant other, um, both like both of you, all you want to do is just stay home and chill on Valentine's Day. But you make the assumption that you need to make it a very special day for your significant other. And so in the
Yeah.
days leading up to Valentine's Day, you're stressing
Sweating.
yourself out to get the right, present or gift or flowers or make reservations or like you come up with plans to set up like breakfast in bed or whatever the case may be. And the thing is like you do it because you want to do it, right? For your significant other, but it's like you're doing it from this genuine belief that that's what they want and that anything less than that wouldn't be right for Valentine's
Mhm.
Day. And
Yeah.
then what happens is you never even talk about it, right? Like you go to dinner, you have the breakfast in bed or whatever, but you never even talk about like, actually, I really just wanted to stay home today. Oh, really? I me
Yeah.
too. Like you never talk about that, and then that adds up, right? Because like one thing happen like the next thing happens, you make that assumption, and it's like we constantly do this with so many different things where it's like, yeah, if I don't do it this way or if it's not to this like standard or whatever, then it's not right and I'm wrong, and
Yeah.
so that's like that's so simple, but it's so big because it's like I know for a fact if you're listening to this, you can think of a couple things that
Yeah.
that you do
When
that
you
with.
whenever you go to the store and it's like a bunch of guys on Valentine's Day, just standing by the flowers, just looking. We're looking at each other like, so you here too, huh? It's like you should have gotten your flowers early.
Mhm.
That's why I'm glad um my partner and I my wife and I we've we've decided that we'll start like celebrating Valentine's early. So like maybe the weekend before we'll go out to go eat. And then we already tell each other from early on. I realized that like, oh, um, she actually told me, she's like, oh, you don't have to stress out too much about this. You can just do this, or we can just do this. So we just go out to eat, and it's helped our because there's so much stress during Valentine's Day, right? All these expectations, like you got to get flowers, you got to get chocolate, you got to sign a card, you got to I don't know all these things that
And then you see other people
oh
do it. And then right,
yeah,
especially with like social media and stuff, you see someone else post that they got a whole bunch of flowers and you're like,
yeah,
I'm
a Lamborghini.
yeah, Lamborghini. Exactly. A
Yeah,
brand
it's too
new
much. Yeah, no,
yeah.
it just sucks because I think there's that side of like society that puts that pressure to be perfect on you, um, and if you're
But
not
it's not
careful
even
of it,
society. It's like you genuinely think that though. It's
yeah,
like yes, it comes from society, but it's like so many things where you're like this
it's
is
become a
just this is
truth.
how yeah, like this is how it is. Like
Yeah,
this is how it's done. And not only that, but it's like, oh, the stress of it is just part of Valentine's Day. The
yeah,
stress of me like tripping over this. It's just what it is. Like we kind of fallen into that.
yeah, and it those those situations where it's like okay, well, like even other holidays where it's like Christmas, all those expectations on parents that
Hmm.
to get certain things for their kids, and I don't know, it's like we've been saying, it's like if you're not careful, that overmounting like weight on you to do that thing, that belief that you've kind of given yourself, not by any fault by you, but you just genuinely believe, like you said, can be unbearable.
Yeah, and
Um,
then when you relate that to like your profession is really when it starts to get, your creative profession, working with clients or whatever, that's when it starts to get to be like really dangerous and like,
yeah,
turn into so many different things, can turn into burnout, can turn into to anxiety and stress because it's like we have these misconceptions, honestly, is what they are. Like you mentioned it earlier, was like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, is this like,
it's like, nah,
you
it's
know
killing you.
yeah. Yeah, no,
It's killing you. It's killing you.
exactly. And that's been
Yeah,
this like, rise and grind. um it's been glorified almost, but
yeah.
and I think again, it's this like this miscommunication almost too, because when you look at other people who are in positions that you maybe want to be in, right, who are like quote unquote successful, right, you don't really like, you never really know where their heads are at, like where
Mhm.
their comfort level is with themselves, or like what their stress level is and stuff. Like we work with people, interact with people all the time who may really be like strung out
Mhm.
from being on that hamster wheel, like you said. um and you wouldn't even know it. You would think, oh, okay, yeah, they're doing their thing, or they may even um like not brag about it, but like talk about it, like, yeah, man, you know I'm grinding. I'm
Yeah,
tired, but it's like,
it's
and
working or something.
exactly. And then you look at them and it's like, oh man, they got all this stuff and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And what I like about what the author was saying, also, he gave a story. I was going to talk about it, about how he got his first panic attack. I believe his first
Mm,
panic attack when he was young,
mhm.
and how detrimental that perfectionism can be for younger people, because haven't you're still, like, you're growing emotionally, but that when you first hit your first wall, when you're, this perfectionist, that could be so detrimental, because it's like, this is your first big thing, this is your first big hurdle, and um, you haven't experienced enough losses to say, like, okay, like, I'll recover from this, um, but yeah, it was it was interesting to just hear him speak about, after that he started having panic attacks. I've had a panic attack before. I didn't know what was going on, but when he started describing it, your heart is racing, you feel like you're about to have a heart attack, can't breathe.
You're like, you're
I
about to
remember having
die.
one. Yeah, you're about to die. I'm like,
Yeah.
I, I've I've seen panic attacks, so I thought that that's the only way that it could happen. Um, but experiencing it, and uh, trying to remember what was happening, it's like, what just happened? It feels like a foreign thing. But that's one of the things that can happen when you kind of put yourself in this box that you have to achieve a certain goal. Because that's what happened to me. I felt like, oh, I got to graduate a certain time, and if it's not happening for me, then I'm failing. And then all these things started piling up, and then I just remember one night just getting one, and it
Yeah.
was terrible.
It's mental. I've had a panic attack before myself, so I know exactly what you mean. That feeling when he described it, it was like, yep, that's like, it's what it feels like. And it's if you allow it to be, right, the panic attack can be the most eye-opening thing, because it's like you really see the power of your mind, because that's what it is. Like a panic
Hmm.
attack is like your your body following your mind. And when he described his panic attack, he was talking about how everything he tried to do to make it better just made it worse. And it was
Hmm.
because that was his mind just just spiraling out of control. What's going on? What is this? Am I dying? What is going on? Like, why can't I breathe? Blah, blah, blah. And then that just makes it worse. And then it makes it worse. And then, it compounds. But he also uses this analogy where it's like, where it gets really dangerous is you can either take that opportunity and be like, okay, like I see what's happening, I see what's happening, I see why it happened, right? I don't exactly know what it is, but I'm conscious of that. Like, yeah, I'm like putting pressure on myself, whatever the circumstance is. But there's also a lot of people who are absolute perfectionists, and in that moment they still look at it as like, oh man, I shouldn't, if I was stronger, this wouldn't have happened to me. And he has that analogy where he talks about like like being full speed on a treadmill, where
Mm-hmm.
like the perfectionist will be full sprint on a treadmill and will be exhausted, but he or she'll look around and see that people are watching, so it's like, oh, I can't stop, people are
Yeah.
watching me. And all it takes is one little like slip, and the next thing you know, you're flying off the treadmill, right? That could be the panic
Mm-hmm.
attack, is flying off the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
But then he says the perfectionist will try and get back on the treadmill without turning it off first. It's like, because they think like, oh no, like I like, that's the speed that I need to be at. If I'm not there, then I'm failing. And and it's like, it's this big psychological thing that is no laughing matter, because it's a lot of people are really suffering,
Yeah.
in that way. But
Yeah.
I think it's really powerful to kind of have that understanding, um of what's going on, because in my experience, the panic attack was like knowledge, right? It was like knowledge is
Mm-hmm.
power. It was like, dang, this is what can happen, right? This is how it manifests. And it's
Yeah.
like, that could be the catalyst to really kind of, but it takes having that level of like awareness, that I think if you're really, really like deep as a perfectionist, you can slip into that trance, like you said.
Yeah. Where you completely forget to listen to your body. And, you know, I think something that I'm starting to realize as I get older is that you can, you can die from being too stressed out, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm the type of person where I don't get sick. I don't, I don't get colds or anything like that. Always wake up kind of around the same time, like 7 or 6, and like I have enough energy for the day. Um, my body doesn't hurt most of the time, but the one thing that I definitely experience a lot is like emotional stress, definitely anxiety, panic, and this whole time, I thought like I'm healthy. Look, like I don't have pains like everybody else. Haven't broken any bones, but with the older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing is that being able to control that side of me, the side that feels like they can't breathe, or the side that gets panic attacks, is just as important as working out and eating well. Um, and I kind of want to shift a little bit. I think I have I have a story I want to share with you, kind of about this, and it's about it's about technology, um, because, like you said, uh, if we're not careful, and just the idea of perfectionism today is like, it's like different, because now we have Monday.com. We got all these trackers that can keep an eye. You can keep an eye on an employee as soon as they turn on their computers, right? If you work somewhere, you can be tracked a certain way. Um,
Open concept offices.
Open, yeah, so everyone knows what you're doing. Um, so it's just very easy to. I mean, it's happening. There's technology that's been added to the way that you perform. So they can be pretty much like, people are like, you got to hit this goal or else this doesn't happen for you, right? So just to kind of say and talk about that, I want to talk about this documentary I watched called Alpha Go. and we were talking a little bit about Alpha Go. Well, we were talking about the documentary, but I don't think you know what Alpha. Oh, not sorry. The game Go is. So Go is it's a game that was, I think it was started in like the 17th century in Japan, or it was played in Japan and China. And basically, what it is, it's a board game, but on it there's these black and white kind of, I think they're rocks or stones or something like that, and it looks like a checkerboard, but it's not black and white. It's just all kind of like grid system, and you play by moving your pieces throughout the board. But the thing about the game is that there are more possible ways. Actually, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's true. There are more possible moves in Go than there are atoms in the universe. So it's this very very complex game, right? So the documentary AlphaGo was about this computer that was created to become the best AlphaGo player, or sorry, the best Go player in the world. So it was just they were like training it. So the documentary is going through like the training, and then there's this other side where it's like, okay, these are the humans who are going to play against this computer, and the computer's getting better and better, right? And then the big, the big, the big ending is like, okay, now you're going to play the best Go player in the entire world, right? So it's this big deal, and people are like recording it. People, because they want to know, it's like, is this even possible? Like, this is the best human player that we have. So the match starts. They're playing. Everything is, I don't know what's happening, but it's obviously intense because it's a lot of thinking. You have to think through the
Yeah,
possibilities of all your moves. I mean, it's like a billion. I don't even know how many atoms
yeah.
there are in the universe, but it's a lot, right? A lot of possibilities. So midway, um, like the human guy, I forgot his name. I think his name was like Leo or something like that. He was a Korean player, but he's just sitting there. He's looking at it, and then he like he looks at it for like maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and then he walks out, and then he comes back, and then he says that he can't do it anymore. So what had happened was the the computer had figured out a move that had never been done before. So the guy was like, I don't even know how to. I didn't even know you could do that, kind of. Um, and 3 years later, he quit. He retired from the game. He doesn't play anymore. But it was just an interesting, I guess, documentary perspective on what happens on the other side of perfectionism. It's like this guy. I don't know if he was jaded because the computer beat him, but I know he had a quote where he was like, "Even if I was the best, there is something else that's better than me. So there's no reason for me to play anymore." Um, and that's like that level of like he's been good at that thing for so long, and then now his whole identity has to stop because he knows that he's put so much of himself into this thing that there's nothing else that he can do in it. So I just thought I thought it was an interesting thought. It was something I was thinking about while I was listening to the book. Just like every once in a while, I'll think about this player and how different his life is now. All those things that he learned how to do, and uh,
There's a
uh,
ton of
yeah,
there's a ton of figures that everybody's familiar with in some way or another that you can like and it's and it fa- and it's interesting because it's like it's fascinating to us to look at people like this. People who I'm familiar with would be someone like Michael Jordan,
yep,
Kobe,
the
you
goat.
know, exactly. Tiger Woods, right? Like these
Yeah,
athletes who have established themselves as like the best, and there's countless stories of the people who they've played with where you see behind the scenes of what they, how they obsessed and how they were and their expectations of others and the way that they practiced and the way that, you know, like I can only imagine like Well, I can't imagine, but like I could try to imagine the way like Michael Jordan would like respond to a robot that could just that he couldn't beat. You know what I mean? Like like
I'd
in a
break
one
them.
v one. Exactly.
Yeah, you break them.
Like that would be like to someone who's got that mentality, because it really is like a mentality um that you could argue isn't healthy, right? Like you could argue that.
No,
But
yeah.
at the same time you look at what they've achieved and it's like, okay, well what did they, what did they give up, or what did they what did they tell themselves along the way about like what their value was. We don't know how they perceive themselves, right? Like if they even allowed themselves to like accept the praise that they've gotten from others as being the best.
Yeah.
If they're always like, are they satisfied with that? Like when you really think about like
Mm.
being in that position and still not being satisfied, like that sounds like, that really sounds like uh a
Sounds like
nightmare.
hell.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
exactly.
like, they
To
to have everything that, you I guess you wanted at the beginning to have, and just to never stop,
mhm.
it's, I don't know, it
And I
feels
think
sad
that
and
and I
exhausting.
think what that is this misconception that there's a point to reach, that there's a end goal to reach, right? I
Mhm,
think that that's when I was really thinking about that, I feel like that's like really where a lot of this comes from, with like serious perfectionists have this misconception that there is a point that they can
mhm,
attain, right? Where it's like, I did it, right? A flag that they can mark. When the reality of it is everything is always going, always going, always going. And so you need to find like, if you know that, you need to find ways to find satisfaction with where you are, with where you are, with where you are, with where you are. Like that's where you need to be able to find that dopamine, right? We kind of talked about that even when Lizzie was on the show. Is like that dopamine response that your body has can't be this delayed thing, this delayed satisfaction. Oh, I'll be happy when I finally get blah blah blah, or I'll be happy like I got this, but I'll really be happy when this happens, because then you'll keep going, and you'll never be happy.
mhm. No,
And
no, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna comment on, like, yeah, like, I I just wonder, like you said, about um those giants of the industry, the people who are constantly like churning out work, what it does to their body. I feel like it'd be interesting to find out, um, how someone who was once a perfectionist kind of left that 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 track, because I think it's very easy for us to be like, they're probably exhausted like constantly or something, but it'd be interesting to find out like what did they psychologically have to do to get out of that mode, because
Yeah,
I'm sure
get a
it's,
step back.
yeah, that's
You
the
know,
ability to step back and look at yourself in that way, and still, um, still churn out work that's just as good, in whatever you do in whatever industry. And I'd be interested to find out how that happens.
yeah. And there's
uh,
levels to like society too, right? There's
mhm,
like, you know, over here in the West, um, things are move at a much faster pace, like across the board. Like there's even levels to it here, Kansas versus New York City, right? But
mhm,
even when you compare that to like, places in Asia, places in Africa where they have so much less, like material wise, right? You could argue than we have, but yet they're healthier, and they maybe even be happier, right? Just because
mhm.
things are simple and they don't put these burdens on themselves that that so many of us do. And that makes me think of the parable Um, I sent you. That was the first
Yeah,
time. That was the first time you saw that the parable of the businessman and the fisherman.
yeah. It was the first time. It was it made my heart smile because I was like it's such a
Yeah,
simple idea that I was like, huh, like what is the end goal? Like,
yeah.
what are
Let me
we?
read it. Let me read it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you haven't heard this parable, you may have heard this before, but it's a parable that kind of really highlights um, this hamster wheel that we put ourselves on and this expectation that we have, especially as it pertains to like delayed gratification. You know, when in reality, we should just find ways to find that satisfaction in our present moment, right? Always just trying to find something to be happy about now. That that's really the way to live, right? So the parable is the following. There was once a businessman who was sitting by the beach in a small Brazilian village. As he sat, he saw a Brazilian fisherman rowing a small boat towards the shore, having caught quite a few big fish. The businessman was impressed and asked the fisherman, "How long does it take to catch you so many fish?" The fisherman replied, "Oh, just a short while." "Then why don't you stay longer at sea and catch even more?" The businessman was astonished. "This is enough to feed my whole family," the fisherman said. So the businessman then asked, "So, what do you do for the rest of the day?" Fisherman replied, "Well, I usually wake up early in the morning, go out to sea, catch a few fish, then go back, play with my kids. In the afternoon, I take a nap with my wife, and then when the evening comes, I join my buddies in the village for a drink where we play guitar, sing, and dance throughout the night." So the businessman offered a suggestion to the fisherman. He said, "I'm a PhD in business management. I could help you to become a way more successful person. From now on, you should spend more time at sea and try to catch as many fish as possible. When you've saved enough money, you can buy a bigger boat, catch even more fish. Soon, you'll be able to afford to buy more boats, set up your own company, your own production plant for canned food, and a distribution network. By then, you will have moved out of this tiny village into Sao Paulo, where you can set up a headquarters to manage your other branches." The fisherman asks, "And after that?" The businessman laughs heartily. He says, "After that, you can live like a king in your own house. And when the time is right, you can go public and float your shares in the stock exchange and you'll be rich." The fisherman asks, "And then after that?" The businessman says, "After that, you can finally retire, move to a house by the fishing village, wake up early in the morning, catch a few fish, then return home to play with the kids, have a nice afternoon nap with your wife, and then when evening comes, you can join your buddies for a drink, play the guitar, sing, and dance throughout the night." The fisherman was puzzled. "Isn't that what I'm doing now?"
I love that.
It's so good. It's so
It's
good.
good,
It's
man.
so simple. And
Yeah.
it's so like honestly, I mean, it's like you said, it just brings a smile to your face because it's like, wouldn't that be the perfect way to kind of like frame your life, right?
Mhm.
It's like, what do I like? How do I want to be? How do I want to feel? You know, like forget what I want to achieve, right? It's like, okay, I want to be the best at this. I want to be the best at that. I want to, have X amount of dollars in my bank account so I can buy these things and go to these places. But it's like, okay, cool. But how do you want to feel? Like, how do you want to be every day? Like, oh, I want to wake up and be relaxed. I want to wake up and be at ease, not have to worry about anything. I want to wake up and, have time to spend with my wife and my kids and, you know, watch them grow, blah, 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 blah. I want to feel happy. It's like, okay, well, what can you find now that can make you feel that way? You know, it's like
Yeah.
you can find something in your present moment, surely, that can start to make you feel that feeling now, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like when you go after the feeling, as opposed to the the material thing. It's like, as you know, from moment to moment to moment to moment, you're always satisfied. And then it's just easy to go through with doing whatever you're doing to try to achieve it, because it's like you're not putting this burden of this delayed gratification, because you constantly have it, in the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one of the things you and I have talked about a lot is like, you can achieve gratitude and a feeling for something like now. If you feel like excited about your artwork, you can feel it now because you're like, oh shoot, I get to do this. I get to make these things. And you don't have to wait until you have that $10,000 client because ultimately it's going to feel the same, right? It's going to feel like, like you're like, obviously you're excited, but um, unless you're enjoying it as you're going, then it's like, you're not even going to enjoy it at the end if you're just kind of waiting for it. That's one of the things that I feel like I've realized as I've gotten older, I guess, or started my career is that, I got to be excited about the small stuff just as much as the big things because, unless there's no reason for me to be waiting, for the
It's like,
final thing.
and that just made me think too. It's like, how will you know when you're happy if you've never allowed yourself to be happy? Like, how will
Yeah,
you know that you found what you're looking for? You know what I mean? It's like when you never allowed yourself to feel it. Does that make sense?
that makes
Like
perfect sense. Yeah.
like how are you gonna move and say, "Oh, okay, I'll be happy." I know for a fact that I'll be happy once I get this promotion, once I do this. I just need to work harder, work harder. I'll be uncomfortable and annoyed and cranky now, but I'll be happy when I get like, you don't even know what it feels like to be like at ease and to be
Hmm.
relaxed, because you don't allow yourself to even do it. So it's like, how can you get that from that point? You won't. You'll never get it when you like live that way. And so, like you said, the perfect um like phrase that you use at the beginning of this episode was that like psychological trance that we put
Hmm.
ourselves in, of this like hamster wheel feeling. And it's really about, how can I find a way to be happy now, right?
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
the goal.
Yeah. And the fact that it's possible now is kind of freeing, right? It's not, you're not waiting to like make more money or something. You're not waiting to meet new people. You can look around and see the things around you, uh, and feel just as good. That's a very freeing thing. I think when we first spoke about it, that's what I realized. I was like, wow, like that feels nice to be able to say like, you know, what does my perfect day look like? And for the most part, I can usually put together the things I need to get there. Yeah, like, everyone has a perfect day. I think my perfect day is like, I wake up in the morning, I go for like a walk. I get to make things that are exciting, either with like food or art, probably exercise. I talk to my wife, play video games. That's all stuff I can do now. I can do that shit now.
Yeah, and then and not feel like you're a bum for doing it,
Yeah.
because you're not grinding to get, XYZ. It's like,
Yeah.
another thing that I love that he mentioned in the book was like about soil, like providing like fertilizer to crops. It's like when a crop is brand new and fresh and you add fertilizer, it really revs up its growth. But it gets to a certain point where if you keep adding fertilizer to it, it doesn't do anything anymore. And then if you keep adding it to it further, then it actually becomes detrimental to the crop. And he compared that to like our exertion level, right? This
Mhm.
like this energy that we put forth, that we flood into whatever work that it is that we're doing. starts off great because you
Uh,
have this motivation and you
hold
have
on.
this drive.
Somebody's at the door. What the hell?
Uh-oh. I talked him up.
Oh, wait. It's Jehovah's Witness. Oh, fuck. Okay.
Carry on.
They were just here. I told them not to come here. Well, Osley told them, he's like,
He said,
we're
I'm
not,
doing
we're not about it.
the podcast. Leave
I'm
me
like,
alone.
damn. And they can see me because my window's open.
Just put your hat down. Just like so fertilizer, right? This energy that you're flooding that you're flooding into what you're doing.
They're still here. Okay.
It reaches a certain they can hear this too, because maybe this will
Yeah.
help. Turn me up.
All right.
I'm up. You got me up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it becomes a point where the exertion level that you're putting in to whatever it is that you're trying to achieve becomes gradually more and more detrimental. So it's like you start off a project with a lot of energy, a lot of vigor, maybe some late nights, and that'll feel good. But then it gets to the point where you're sacrificing seeing family, seeing friends, eating well, sleeping well, and that imbalance, right, becomes more detrimental than the extra effort that you're putting into the work. And so what that leads to is burnout, which is
Mm,
the crankiness, the tiredness, the exhaustion, the feeling of like the feeling that you're standing still and not making any progress, which is like the most frustrating thing to a perfectionist, because it's like I'm putting in all this effort, I'm putting in all this work, blood, sweat, and tears, and I'm not seeing any progress. Or I'm seeing
yeah.
just as much progress as the person here that's like, that goes to the movies every weekend. What's
Yeah.
up with that? This guy's going to the to the
My
beach.
unemployed friend. Like, how
Exactly.
was he? Like, he always
No,
got money.
exactly. And he's right here with me doing the same thing. It's like he's not making a sacrifice. And that's like such a big misconception, is that
Yeah.
this energy, this exertion level that we put into things is like the consistency of doing that will just net us more. But really, it just becomes more and more detrimental, and you lose that balance, and you start to fall off and get tripped up, and maybe even move backwards. Right? That's when the panic attack hits.
Yeah.
when the chest pain and the poor sleep, crankiness all the time. Now all of a sudden you never feel like working, and it takes you 2-3 weeks just to get back to normal, and it's like,
Yeah. You put
what was the
yourself in
point?
this position, and that I think that's a good way to segue because off to closing the podcast, but um, that idea of perfectionism or perfectionist, should I say, falling off the treadmill and forgetting to turn it off. It's
Yeah.
like you've already hurt yourself, but now because you have kind of built this ego, um, you can't say like, "Oh, I need to stop." You're just like, "I got to keep going." Like your fingers are falling off, but you're like, "I got to keep typing or moving my mouse." Because sometimes like that will happen. It's like like you're physically hurt. I've felt that before, where it's like, oh, my body physically hurts, like my wrist hurts, but I'm still like focused on these pixels. Um, but nah.
Still out there?
Any closing thoughts?
You still out there? They heard what I said. Heard what you said.
I haven't gone up almost.
Closing thoughts. Perfectionism is very interesting kind of um psychological exercise that you can start to ask yourself, to what extent are you okay with something not being perfect, or something not being you know worked on for 40 hours or whatever, like to what extent are you okay with resting for 4 days, 3
Mm,
days, to you know seriously ask yourself, could I could I do nothing this weekend? Like,
Yeah.
would I be okay with that? Or would I feel like would I genuinely feel like I'm regressing and failing because I'm not grinding, you know? Like,
Yeah.
these are questions that are worth really kind of asking yourself and getting an understanding of where you're at, because it really is this trance, this psychological trance that we put ourselves in, really
Mhm.
is the product of a lot of misconceptions in our environment and external stressors and stuff. So um yeah, I think the conversation about perfectionism is one that you gotta have with yourself, and you gotta
Yeah.
gotta look at it. How
Yeah,
you doing?
definitely. Like, just to close off, definitely check out the book that we mentioned, The Perfection Trap: Embracing the Power of Good Enough by Thomas Curran. I think that's how you pronounce his name, Jamil.
Curran, yeah,
Curran, yeah,
Curran.
Quran. But yeah, amazing book. Um, Glad we got recommended it, and yeah, that's the pod.
That's the pod.
Yeah.
Peace.